I have two public comment forms. One is from Whitner Dietrich. Mr. Dietrich, good morning.
Judge Warren, good morning, Commissioners.
We have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you. I'll be as fast as I can. My penmanship's awful. My name's Whitner Dietrich. I'm a 27-year resident of Denton County. I'm concerned in the naming of the committee for the removal of or not the removal, but for a plaque for the Confederate monument. I believe we're trying to overly narrow the discussion before we even get started. I do believe it must address the actual removal. When I first spoke before the Commissioners Court, I pointed out that the monument itself will be a flashpoint for violence. We got a taste of that the Sunday before last at our own monument. Mr. DeMarsh and Kenneth, I don't know his last name, had set up to counter-protest, which is their right, and I welcome them, when a group of young men claiming to be with Mr. Hudspeth started haranguing them. This was not respectful dialogue, as their intent was to cause trouble, and eventually Mr. DeMarsh lost his cool, got up and shoved one of them. This was done in front of one of the Denton County deputies. Soon we had 5 uniformed officers on site. These 4 instigators, they were not with Willie's group, nor were they with Indivisible Denton. Their goal, straight up, was to cause trouble, and they did. This is just the beginning. The 3 neo-Nazis responsible for the shooting this week in Florida, they were from Texas. They had been camped out at the Robert E. Lee statue in Dallas before its removal. Please understand, Commissioners, the events that occurred in Charlottesville completely changed the debate over these statues. I do not want to see violence like that in Denton. The plan to replace the plaque is, in my opinion, a waste of time and will not solve the problem. To give the full context of Jim Crow, America's institutionalized racism, and the fairy tale of the lost cause is going to require a plaque as tall as the monument itself. Without that, the protest will continue, and the danger is going to remain for Denton County. Please consider full removal of the statue. Put it in a context that we can safely view it, but not have the potential of danger and violence to the citizens of Denton County. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Hudspeth? Good morning.
Morning, Judge and Commissioners. My name is Willie Hudspeth. I live at 623 Newton. It was discussed last night at our planning meeting for the our committee planning meeting. Why aren't there more African Americans here with me if this is such a big issue? I didn't have an answer. So we've decided that we're going to go into the community and ask, what's your thought? Because this started out to be my thought, what I wanted, and still is. I just speak for myself. But it made me wonder, why aren't more African Americans up here talking with me? And so I don't know, but I'm going to find out. Now, to get to the subject of what we're doing here today, if I'm ever a member of this Commissioner's Court, if I get to be a member, let me tell you some things that, and I want it to be on record, that I will never do. I will never let this happen to with me being here without saying something. And that's one of the things. There's 5 of you. If all 5 of you agree with what one is saying, then that's okay. But if you don't, you should be saying something. I think that's my thought again. And if one of you is out of line, if I'm out of line as a member of this court, you need to help me and get me back in line publicly with respect. I'm not talking about infighting. I'm talking about just support. You say, we're not going to let that happen. We're not going to let that happen during our watch. Examples. Quit changing the meeting times on the day of the meeting. Where in the world does that come from? How do you justify that? Quit changing what's going to happen. I had some high-level NAACP members coming to that meeting last week. The state chairman of the NAACP for Texas and the regional chairman, president of the NAACP were coming. I found out the day of that we weren't going to have it, and we were going to speak for, we were going to have two people or 5 people to speak. That will never happen. Not without me saying something to the effect, that's not the way we're going to do business. Now, I'm out of order if all of you, in fact, agree with that, what's been happening as far as this agenda and the changing of it. Then there's no discussion. Promising you right now, I will never let that happen. And I'm going to let people speak.
Your time's up, sir. Jennifer Lane signed up for 3 different agenda items. You get to you speak for one.
I may end up having to leave because I teach.
Okay, go ahead.
So I will try to cover it in this one. And I don't know that that's a rule that has ever been imposed before, to be able to speak on only one.
Go ahead.
Those agenda items may be different, and public may wish to speak on all of them. So if I'm still here, I will plan to do so. All right, the first 3 questions here are, who among all you, commissioners and Judge Horn, are still uncertain that the fountains once worked? And what evidence would prove to you that the fountains once worked? And are the monument's segregated fountains relevant to the debate on the monument's appropriateness on public property, particularly on a courthouse lawn? Let me turn to an article which I've sent a couple of you, and we'll send the rest later today. This is an interview with an author who has studied the relationship between the Nazis and their study of American Jim Crow law. What were they, the Nazis, interested in learning about American law? Answer: American law, hard though it may be for us to accept it now, was a model for everybody in the early 20th century who was interested in creating a race-based order or race state. America was the leader in a whole variety of realms in racist law in the first part of that century. Some of this involved American immigration law, which was designed to exclude so-called undesirable races from immigration. There was also American law creating forms of second-class citizenship for African Americans, of course, but also for other populations. Those were of special interest to the Nazis. Interviewer: You write that the U.S. Supreme Court entertained briefs from southern states whose arguments were indistinguishable from those of the Nazis. Author answering: They were. The sorts of things the Nazis said, often using terms like mongrelization and bastardization of the population, were often also said by Southern racists. It was exactly the same vocabulary. They turned to us. If you go further in this interview, you'll discover that the single drop theory that was used in the South was something that even the Nazis considered to be going too far. We have a lot to address here. We have to move that monument. And we have to move it somewhere where it can be surrounded by access, easy access to all this history. Tell it all, move it to preserve it. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last public comment form I have is from Bryce Goodman. Good morning.
Good morning. This is public comment. I'll talk about something separate than the Confederate Monument today for this part. Looking through the Commissioner's Court and their duties and the things they're supposed to do, I have talked to a couple of you before about the lack of social media and public access to understand when and where court will be held and the things that will be held. City Hall, when they have any kind of event or court meeting, they post on social media quite frequently with all the updated information. I talked to a couple of you and you said you did have a paid official who did this, but it never comes up. So who's paid? I want that job because they get paid but they don't do anything. Second, I was looking and noticed that you are also in charge of the county veteran services. So I was curious and I looked up their page. The page is one page. It says check on Facebook. You click it, you can't do anything. There's no link to Facebook. You look at the rest of the page and there's a little bit of writing and it says the Denton County Services Office offers vital assistance to the Denton County veterans and their dependents filing for VA benefits. But it doesn't say what they can do there or any of the other offers they have or any services. It just says you can help, maybe. What is actually there, though, is a large asterisked out red text, and it says, to better serve, we ask visitors to arrive as close to opening hours for the day or opening hours after lunch. Arriving closer closer to closing runs the risk of being asked to return at a later time or a date due to our busy operations. Our goal is to serve and give adequate time to each visitor and provide high quality of service. As a general rule, our walk-in hours are 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. The building is open 8 to 5. Any appointments are strictly scheduled by the service. I'm just kind of disappointed that almost the entire page is just telling people that they're most likely not going to be seen, and they have very few opportunities to get there in the day for our veterans and their vital service they've done to our country. I wish there'd be a little bit more open and transparent, just with like the social media, have more of a post and more of a inviting and helpful services if these are the services they're supposed to provide, and you are supposed to provide them. Thank you.
Okay. Members, we're going to take up 13D and 16A together. What have you got? Okay. Well, let's see here. To start with, I've got 3 public comment forms here that did not wish to speak, but duly noted here. Paxton Swisher, I'm in support of forming the 2 committees, 16A and 13D, I guess it is, yeah. And 16, yes, 16A. Deborah Cosimo does not support formation of the Confederate Soldier Memorial Plaque Committee. However, if this is the direction the court decides to take, the information should be complete, underlined, including the reason for the war. And then Deborah Cosmo also put, I support formation of the County Advisor Committee. Okay. Yes. I think, do we have more forms, Cheryl? Yeah. Okay. Well, let's see if we can, since we're taking both items together, even though you filled out 2 forms, I want you to come up here and address both items at the same time. Jennifer Lane, you're still here. Why don't you come back up?
So Mary, do we want to take the public comments and then have a discussion? Or do you want to discuss, then take the public
Which would you rather do?
Just trying to make sure we get it done quickly as possible.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever you think.
I'm okay hearing from them.
I think we should maybe suggest a time limit for the comments.
Well, please limit your time. I mean, we'd like to give everybody an opportunity to speak, but we also don't need
I
to
would,
be
problem.
here all
if
day.
they have anything new, I'd like to hear it, but I
Sure.
looked, the day I was in Corpus, I saw the whole video and saw the comments that were delivered to me, so,
Thank you for the opportunity.
well, I wasn't
Chris.
finished.
Sure.
Thank you. So I looked at all that stuff, and, I think that if we have people who want to repeat what they've said previously, I think that's really not conducive to a productive discussion.
I agree.
Thank you.
Okay,
I have a series of questions for you,
okay.
and I don't know if you're able to discuss them with me at this point. I would like that. I asked the first three about the evidence of them working, and I'd like to go on and say, who among the five of you considers a plaque committee to be sufficient? I'll keep asking the questions until you want to answer one. What is the purpose of a new plaque? How big will it be? As Whit Dietrich said,
That would be
Big
yet to
story.
be decided.
will it be proportional to the amount of history which relates to the monument? Who is on the committee, and will their work be conducted in open meetings?
We don't know who's going to be on it yet.
Who decides the historical accuracy of the plaque's content? This is the fourth one, of course. Who decides the relevancy of the history as it is applied to the content? It's going to be the Commissioner's Court. Will it be the county's monument committee? How will this be decided? Will the court or the committee vote? Is that how we're going to decide historical facts? By a vote of some sort? Or by popular vote in our governmental bodies? Exactly how are we going to do this? I will go on record as saying that I support item 16A. Do not support 13D. I also believe that the committee should be a deciding body, not an advisory body, a deciding body. You should give it full power and put people on it who will get this done in a way that any African American can live with. Anyone.
Ms. Lane, as any government body will tell you that when we form committees, they are advisory committees to the Commissioner's Court or to the City Council or whatever government body there is. And the Commissioner's Court do get the final say on
I
the
understand.
recommendation.
I understand that.
Just like we do all the other committees.
I understand that. I work within a governmental
Yeah,
body
so
of a
you
sort
know.
myself.
So we will be
But-
we will have the final word on this committee also.
Sure, but I do
Regardless of-
understand that you have the ability from the outset to change that. That you can say,
Absolutely.
you guys take this and you guys decide.
Right.
That
You
you do
need to
have. You can do that
clarify.
at this point.
This committee is not a decision-making body. They are so far as making a recommendation to Commissioner's Court.
I understand that's what
Commissioner's
you're
Court-
setting up.
Excuse me. Commissioner's Court will then make a decision on whatever their recommendation is. But after that, anything that is proposed concerning the monument would have to be approved by Texas Historical Commission. We are not the final decision maker on what does or does not happen to the monument. That would go to the Texas Historical Commission. And whatever is proposed, this may or may not be a cost factor associated with it. So this body would have to decide how you're going to pay for it.
Yes, I understand that
Okay.
you're setting up an advisory committee, but I'm also pointing out that you could set up a decision committee if you wanted to.
I don't believe we could delegate our authority. Ultimately, the buck stops with us.
That's not right.
If any of y'all went to ninth grade in Texas, you took high school government, you realize this is a representative government.
There are-
Elected, excuse me, the commissioners were elected by our constituencies to make those decisions.
Sure, I
Unless
understand
it's
that.
a statutory entity, much like the Civil Service Commission or the Lake Ray Roberts Planning and Zoning, which is still only advisory, the buck stops with us. Now, I know that
Don't need
it
to
may be
speak to
different
me
at
as a
UNT,
kindergartner. I
where
understand how
everything's
government
done by
works.
a committee,
Finish.
but it is done by the Commissioner's Court. Even if we take a position, it is us who either has to live with it or not.
I understand.
Now, I can tell you this, we could probably have a long debate about history and probably have a lot of different opinions. Your views are probably different than mine.
I'm not concerned with
But-
views.
Yes, you did. You basically stated who is going to be pushing which version of history.
I asked that
I
question.
will recommend that we use our Department of History and Culture and ask them to come up with something.
Interesting. There'll be more on that. being as how Willie Hudspeth has been asking that for 18 years.
Ms. Lane, I've been working for the county in one way or another since 1999, and I would tell you that I've known Mr. Hudspeth, although he's actually only spoken to me once in that whole time. And I would tell you that the fact that he says he's been here every year for 17 years is not necessarily correct.
Let me also say that although there are arguments for and against either a decision-making body or an advisory body, I understand that you guys want to have the final
We don't
responsibility.
want to. Ms. Lane, we don't want to. We have the final authority, whether we decide it or not.
You want to have the final authority, and perhaps you should. Perhaps your reputations and names should go on whatever is decided here. However, there are two different ways in which you could go. As far as the history of this monument, the material that has been found that shows that the fountains were working is in your archives. It's available to everyone, but it does require historical research. And there have been people who have come to this court who have remembered drinking from them, who have been told to their faces that their memories are incorrect. And there are not two versions of history. There are complete and incomplete versions of history.
Okay,
Thank you.
let's go to the next speaker, please. Cindy Spoon. Finally, Cindy Spoon with Ron Seifert. Good morning.
Okay, so I will be speaking on both agenda items as one. But before I start my comments, I just wanted to say that whenever I come to the county commissioner meetings, we always start with a prayer at the beginning. And today, the prayer it was about hate. It was about getting rid of hate in our hearts. It was about getting rid of hate in this court. So that really spoke to me because it's so funny. I feel like the reason that I'm here is to ask this court to get rid of a symbol of hate. And that, I don't know, maybe that message is coming in, and just listen to the people that you represent. Anyways, so as far as the agenda items, I wish to ask Judge Horn to please withdraw the agenda item that is just for a plaque committee, and to please support Commissioner Mitchell's item to create a committee to consider all options. A plaque committee is inadequate. Why limit the conversation? I don't understand the reason why we would limit the conversation. Why limit the democratic process? So I support Commissioner Mitchell's committee, and furthermore, I think the public should have input on who is on the committee. It's our committee. I hear the things you're saying that you get to decide and you're the representative, but really you're our representatives. It's our committee. It's our town square. So I don't think
Let me ask you this. Are you a resident of the city of Denton?
Yes, can I just make
Do you understand this would be a county-wide referendum, not
I
a city
do
of
understand
Denton?
that.
Okay.
I do understand that. And I also understood that you really didn't want to be interrupted, so just let me speak. I don't want to be interrupted. I have one more sentence and I'm going to sit down. Of course I understand this is a county court. I understand that.
Thank you.
Anyways, it's our committee. It's our town square. Yes, it is a county decision, but right now that is centered in the city of Denton. You're right, I probably wouldn't be as vocal if it was centered in Pilot Point or Frisco or Corinth. It's in my town square where I want to hang out on the weekends. I don't want it to be front and center. So I'm asking that you don't cut the public out of this process. And I think we've made it clear, we're not going to go quietly if we are cut out of this process. And it's because that's our democratic right. Thank you.
I'd like to make, okay, go ahead and ask your question, then I want to make it.
Sure.
Can you honestly tell this court that there's been a time in your social life that you have not come to the square because of the monument being there?
I've been on the town square before when there have been people that are armed defending the monument.
Didn't ask you that question.
Well,
I asked you that question. Has there ever been a time that you personally have not come to the square for a social event, have not come because of the monument being here?
And my answer is that I went to the square, but I felt unsafe because there were armed people standing around the monument.
So you've never been to the
guns.
square other than that one time?
That's happened more than once. There's been armed racists surrounding the monument more than once. And it doesn't feel good to be on the square with that happening.
Yeah, you didn't answer my question, but that's okay. Thank you.
I feel like I am answering.
Thank you.
I'd like to make something clear. I think the headline in the paper today was something like Horn and Mitchell push for separate monument committees. I want to make it clear that we don't have a dispute,
Okay.
okay? This body is subject to open meetings laws. I can't have a conversation with two other members of court on this issue that is coming before Commissioner's Court, or I'm in violation of law. So I just wanted to make that clear. We don't have a dispute. You know, we entered into this to have a discussion, and that's why I'm taking up both agenda items at the same time, so we
Yeah.
can talk about the whole thing.
Fair enough. I got my news from the paper, and that's what I
Okay,
understood.
I know. But it's kind of misleading when it's in the paper that we're pushing for separate committees. Well, you know, my priority, as I've stated before, is a new plaque with context that is historically accurate. That is my push. If other people have other interests, fine. They're welcome to have other interests. But that is my focal point.
Okay.
That doesn't mean I'm disregarding everything else. That's just my
I
priority.
hear you. I hear
And
that.
mine is to include the plaque and everything else.
I hear that.
I think we should just go ahead and send it to the Office of History and Culture and tell them to do a historical plaque, and see if it's appropriate, redo it, and move forward.
Okay, Ron
All have
Seifert.
different opinions. That's what we're elected to have.
He just left.
Oh, it's right there.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Ron Seifert, next. Following Ron Seifert would be Bryce Goodman. Morning.
Hi there, good morning, Commissioners, Judge Horn. I'm here to speak also against the committee as put forward in item 13D. I would be in favor of a more open-ended committee as represented in item 16A. I think if we do a little thought experiment and kind of flip 13B on its head, we can kind of see why this model is a bit backwards in my view. I think the meat of what the committee is for is the decision on scope, not the nitty-gritty details. Like, so if the agenda item was instead of a memorial plaque committee, if it was a committee to move the statue, it would seem foolish to get a bunch of citizens together to decide the best way to move it. We'd be like, well, wait, don't we think engineers and people with some experience would be the best ones to come up with the plan to move it? So it seems if you're already establishing a plaque, it's like, well, wait a minute, why are we just asking anyone what's going to be on the language? Don't we want some more informed opinions and more, not just like an ad hoc committee of anyone's opinion? So I feel like the real meat is the scope, and like that's what the people should be determining. And then once it gets past that, yeah, it's probably not just anyone's opinion on specific language or the process of moving it that carries equal weight. So I feel like if we think of it in that terms, if this wasn't about a plaque, but this was using the language of moving it, it would be intuitive that, well, wait, that doesn't make sense to ask y'all. What's your random opinion on how to move the thing? We should ask someone more informed. So that's my kind of breakdown. I have spoke before several times that I do not agree with the monument's presence in the square. I echo things that have been said about the safety concerns to our public. As far as the question you had just asked, you know, I feel very fortunate that I haven't ever been personally dissuaded from going to the square, because I can look at that and I can reference things I've read, images, pictures that are really shocking and horrific, but I think it doesn't strike me the same way as if those lived experiences, racism in the 20th and 21st centuries in our country, plus all the historical oppression and historical trauma that, you know, it doesn't flow through my veins as it does through a lot of my neighbors in this community. So I don't think it's necessarily me as a white person the one that should be like determining, well, I can go there and not necessarily feel offended. But I do have to give caveats. When I have guests visiting Denton, if I want to take them to the square, I have to warn them, you should know you could be traumatized if we go there, because there's this thing that might remind you of the very worst things that's ever happened to you and your family and your ancestors. It might remind you of rape. It might remind you of murder. It might remind you of violence, or it might remind you of segregation. You might have to think of all those things just by going to the square. Is that okay
Give them
with
that
you?
precursor.
Yeah.
You give guests to the town that you love to the square that you love to socially go to, and you give them that precursor before taking them to a place that you love?
Because I love them and I don't want them to be triggered by something that's really provocative. Yeah, I want full transparent. You're going someplace where there could be people that hate you celebrating hate, but there also could just be really traumatic memories that come to mind that you wouldn't choose to bring to mind, but just by seeing them, they might come to mind.
He's assuming everybody has hate in their heart before they come.
Well, that's
Thanks for letting everyone know what my assumptions are. I'm so glad that you have a direct line into my mind.
Well, I've been told that too. That's a tough way to live, man. When you presume everybody hates you before you even come somewhere.
I mean, that's just inaccurate. That's not how I live.
And I don't
You're wrong.
Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt, but my point was that I have personally, I have never come to the square and with people or friends that I have and point out different things to the square and presume they're going to be offended by them, because frankly I'm a teetotaler, okay, and I don't partake in alcoholic use, and I have bad memories of family members that I've had that have succumbed to alcoholism, that I have had trouble with drink or whatever. And I can remember as a child, I wished that I could go and destroy every liquor store there was, because it destroyed so many people in my life. But I sure do not bring people into a situation, say, that bar, I'm sorry I'm bringing you by here because that bar serves alcohol, and you know my family, and you know our family, and it's been traumatized. That's the point I was trying to make to you, sir, that I hope that's not a precursor that you make to everyone, because I don't.
So that's like when you come to the square, you're like, hey, this shows everybody in here in Denton is a racist. Come have a good time.
No, I certainly don't think that everyone in Denton is a racist, and I don't think the statue represents every single human being in this county's politics or views. I think that's very clear just by the conversation we're having in this court. But I do think it has the potential to hurt any number of people, and I just don't want to surprise people by that. You know, the ubiquity of bars and versus Confederate statues or monuments makes it a little apples to oranges. There's hundreds of bars, one monument.
Oranges, sir, it is not, because you already stated to this court that you yourself do not have those feelings every time you come by here, that you only do it to warn somebody. So you've already conditioned yourself to that, and that's what I was telling you, that I've conditioned myself to that. So I don't have to worry about, let them make their own judgment, let them make their own decision about that. That's the only thing I was trying to say to you, sir.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, Ron, when you asked the previous speaker. So have you ever not come to the square because of the monument?
Well, I guess it's kind of the inverse. I feel like I have to come to the square in times that I don't want to try to stand up against folks that are...
So if there's a protest, you want to come to the square because that attracts
Well, no,
you.
Not just a protest. Sometimes it is a public safety issue, right? Like if there's people that are advocating for the continued presence of the statue, maybe trying to intimidate folks with displays of weapons and things like that. I want to be there for my neighbors in a way of solidarity. So there's a lot of times
So in other words, if there's a controversy, that makes you want to come. If there's a
No, I don't want to come. I feel like an obligation out of solidarity, and it's the right thing to do, to face down against racists.
The nice restaurants, those don't make you want to come.
Can I say something?
The protest.
Can we
need to
focus on the committee? I think there's a good purpose here that we can focus on, and you mentioned earlier about the scope of a committee, and I want to spend our time this morning to focus on the scope of the committee. I think the committee can do some good work, and I think we can have a broad scope and do some great historic research from a variety of viewpoints, and I'd like for us to focus on that today. I think that's our business at hand, and that's what we need to be focusing on.
Right.
Andy, let me tell you something, Andy. We have for months sat here and taken a lot of attacks upon this body, attacks on us publicly,
personally,
and there. I understand exactly where you're coming from, and that's exactly what I just told the judge, that
Right.
we need to bring it to that point. That have we've been silent because the law tells us to be silent.
Right.
Well, this is an open hearing. This is
Correct.
an open session that we need to have that kind of dialogue with these folks to give them an understanding of where we're coming from.
Right.
I get
That's
that.
the only reason that I did. But I just turned to the judge and I said, we need to call a vote on this committee
Yeah.
and get that over with, that whether we believe the committee should exist or not.
And what we do,
I agree.
we can, that's why that's why I mentioned to Judge Horn, do we want to vote on the committee to begin with, or do we want to hear public comment to begin with, then vote on the committee? When I'm talking to the constituents, or when I've been lambasted by Mr. Hudspeth, who for years impugned opinions to me without even having spoken to me, it was an interesting endeavor, because under the Open Meetings Act, we're not allowed to consider items, and we're not allowed to engage. And it's amazing to me that the speakers would then say, oh, it's really harmful to have somebody put words in my mouth. It didn't make you feel very good, did it? But that's been happening to us for years, Mr. Hudspeth. And
Kind of like the headline
Yeah,
in the
I
paper
mean-
today. It indicated that Bobby and I are having a big dispute.
so I really,
Talked about
I'm
it.
really, I looked through all the comments that were given, right? I looked at all the documents that were submitted. I reviewed the citizens report. I looked at it. I even spoke, at some time with my constituents to tell them that I was here. And I did the contract with Architectus when I was an assistant DA, and had gone through that process and was through the process of where we pulled the permits, and we did the historical survey and tried to explain to people that you do pull a permit, but that doesn't necessarily mean you do the action for which the permit is pulled. And sometimes financial constraints make it where you don't do it. I think I even watched a video on Facebook where somebody thought, somebody forwarded me, it was a indivisible guerrilla action or whatever, where there's a guy who's a candidate for state rep who thought it was clever to go put birdseed. On one hand, go put birdseed in the fountains of the Confederate Memorial, but on the other hand, complain about the shape of it. Is that an honest person? And that's the kind of mindset we're dealing with, that people, if they truly wanted to have a committee to get something done, I would be all in favor of it. But I don't think this is a committee to get something done. This is a committee to stir up controversy. They're angry about our national government. They're angry about Trump, and they are trying to get people to create action, cause friction, disrupt our society, and as opposed to act in a reasoned manner to move forward. Ultimately, like I told y'all earlier, the buck stops with us. We make the decision. To me, we're going to make that decision ultimately. I think we have a lot of well-paid people in our Office of History and Culture. I think we could change the plaque, and that's why I don't think we need to have a committee, because we're ultimately going to be making the decision. And I think we need to refer the plaque to the people we paid to give us that sort of thing, and that's why I don't want to do the committee. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your statement, but
Can we
those
move-
are my
Yeah,
thoughts.
I'll finish
please.
up. Let me just
Yes.
tie one thing up here. So I agree that, perhaps there is more accountability that the community needs for not showing up at this issue ever since 1999 on a regular basis, but we do live in a world post-Charleston, post-Charlottesville, and yeah, you're right that Trump has, pointed out or radicalized a large part of the population that's already existed. So these are just empirical events that we have to take into consideration, and they are changing the society in which we live. So to pretend, or to hold to pretend that we're not in the world we are, and to point at the differences in the past seems an inconsequential point.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you. DJ Taylor? Good morning. You got Ross Goodman?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
That which happens today is tomorrow's history. The future generations had the benefit of a record of what happens here today, a very rich record, because we have video recordings, transcripts, notes, media reports, and looking back, sketches of what was said or thought is much less complete. But the one thing both today and yesteryear share this: it's hard to know what's in the hearts of the individual. As a historian of the amateur variety, I firmly believe that my role is to open windows to the past, to gather information from as many sources as possible, and to present that information in totality to anyone who cares to listen. I might, at my discretion, offer an opinion. As time moves us from events and actions of people to finding what was in the hearts and minds of those studied become more difficult, leaving opinions that are varied, or as varied as the number of folks studying the issue, it becomes difficult to find what was really happening. It's my opinion that we should not ignore any segment of our history, and our county history is a very rich history, and we should celebrate it. The Confederate soldier at the entry of this building is but one bit of our county's history. Even the complete history of Denton County during the Civil War has yet to be fully written. However, the history of the African American community in Denton County is one of the most woefully neglected segments. It goes beyond Quakertown, beyond the city limits of Denton, and barely explored are the stories of folks like Zach Rawlings, the courthouse janitor. Among the research I've done on Mr. Rawlings is the fact that he helped found one of the first schools in the county for black children. The Hickory School that occupied land is today part of the Louisville Lake. He and others knew that educating their children was of great importance on the path to success. But he is but one of many. Ford Crawford, Sidney Woods, Joe Skinner, Fred Moore, Dr. Moten, Will Hill, George Clark, H.C. Bell. They're just a few that we need to recognize, study, and honor so the history of the freed former slaves who helped build Denton County is fully told. Judge Horn, I ask you and the commissioners to commit to exploring and telling the complete story of all the people of Denton County. There's an opportunity to get it right. So let's get the ball rolling so that history is known and promoted and not just some far-fetched tall tale or celebration of criminals that some consider colorful. That being said, a committee, if approved, must be narrow in its focus and bound by time constraints with definite deadlines. Any recommendations should be fully vetted by the Office of History and Culture and the County Historical Commission. You have demonstrated by past actions and expenditures that you value history. I ask you to use those resources well. I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very well stated. I agree.
EJ, thank you for your comments and thank you for your years of historic preservation on the DCHC. I want to add a comment. I totally agree that we need to do more research and preservation of our African American history. As late as this spring, Commissioner Mitchell and I met with Mr. Hudspeth and asked him to help partner with us and the county and the Office of History and Culture to do just that. So we're all in alignment on that. Thank you.
Paul Metzler. A lot of you have filled out two forms because of the two different agenda items. And
Oh, yeah.
oh, did I skip over you? I'm sorry. Go ahead. Okay, then you'll be next. I'm sorry.
Good morning. First, I just want to comment that's refreshing to, we have this part of the process where we get to actually hear you deliberate and interact. And I would say consistent with that, the community clearly wants to have this conversation. And I would encourage you to move in the direction of a committee that is not straitjacketed for one specific result. Might end up in the same place and it might not, but I believe that the process, the conversation itself is really more important than, frankly, one particular result. And I would encourage you to not to make a decision that would almost guarantee another generation of strife on this thing, and instead opt for a legacy of open conversation, due process, and bringing people together.
Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry I jumped over you.
I'll start by addressing the first few things based on what I've heard so far. First, just to reiterate what I said earlier, as you were speaking about, No problem.
He's Bryce Goodman.
Yep. You're my precinct. Anyway, a minute ago, you were speaking about how the paper quoted you and it was misquoted. That just reinforces my point of use your social media and you can correct things, tell us about the rules before we get in here and all those things so we have an idea of the correct thoughts in your head before we get here and tell you stuff and you tell us we're wrong because we've misheard. In addition to that, we are all ambassadors of our town. When we come to the square or anywhere else and we show our friends around from either other parts of the town or the county or the city or outside of the state, I take my friends everywhere when they're here because Denton's a smaller town, but there's a lot to see and there's a lot of history here, including the monument. And for better or worse, we do talk about it. And when that's mentioned, there are kind of questions like, oh, I didn't know those kind of things were still around and things like that. And you ask, has there ever been a time or I was in fear and did not come to the square? Or you asked
I
them.
didn't ask that question.
Yeah, well, how did you say that?
I think the question was there ever a time that the monument kept you from coming to the square?
Yes.
Well, myself, not personally.
For social reasons.
Myself, not personally, but I have met people who have and don't come to the events or things, especially after Charlottesville, knowing that those kind of things are in contention and they know.
Saying Sharpsville will happen here?
I did not say that. I said that after having that happened, I know people who do not like to come there, especially on Sundays, because people show up and they do not feel safe. There are
And
people
Willie
who come
showing
armed.
up on Sunday makes them not feel safe?
I'm sorry?
Saying Willie showing up on
No,
Sunday
there are
makes
people
them
who
not feel
come
safe?
to counter Willie, and people who would support Willie do not come because they do not feel safe. They are armed. I personally understand it's an open carry state. That doesn't really make me fear anything, but I understand people who do fear that, and especially if they are people of color, that maybe they don't want to be around white people carrying guns saying
Well, I'm
support
glad
the
to hear
Confederacy.
that you like to come to the square other times when there's
Oh, I
not
come all the time.
protests.
I walk. My dog, you'll see me. I've seen you on the square. I say hi. Speaking of, you asked why Willie hadn't spoken to you or other people. I personally would like to speak to all of you. I know I've spoke to Mary Horn a little bit. I've met Miss
Well, I
Mitchell
think
privately.
the other day in the hallway I tried to speak to you and you took off running.
I was not actually running. You heckled me from the third floor while I was talking
No.
to her directly.
I
I
asked
had a
you if you wanted-
conversation with her. If
I
I didn't-
asked you if you wanted to speak and you looked at me and you go, oh,
I was talking to her. You interrupted me and I couldn't hear you because I was speaking to
After
someone
you
else.
yelled at me on the square.
I said, hi, Hugh.
Yeah.
Well, should I say bye?
Well, when you're walking to your office, a random person screams at you. That's
I said hi.
Anyway, that's
all
why I
I
asked
said
you if
was
you
hi.
wanted to
Let's move
speak.
on.
That's if I wanted to speak to you and you took off.
I did not take off. I was walking away. I didn't hear that. I'm sorry, but I will speak to you anytime. Okay.
Shannon, let's move on, please.
All right. In addition, last time we had this open agenda item, we had a discussion, and I've heard you guys talking more, and I'm getting an idea in my head of kind of what may occur. And my question is, it seems kind of convoluted. Andy Eads said any advisory board would have access to advisory experts in both history and restorative properties. My question is there going to be a committee? First, I support 16A versus B, but is there going to be a committee that is historic? There's going to be historians and restorative people helping an advising a committee that is advising the county to advise the THC on what, that seems like it's 4 steps. It seems like you could simplify that, and you said, while you don't have to, there is the option to lay the foundation for that to happen. It just seems very convoluted and kind of out of the way if we are all trying to seek an answer. I support whatever comes, and I want it to work, but I just feel like that's not very transparent and helpful. Like, if we can have historians advise people, why do we need a committee to advise you? Why can't we have the committee be advised by that and make a decision? Why can't we put that to the THC? I mean, the THC is the overall governing body that makes the decision if these ideas are correct or even possible. So if we can send it to them, like back in 2002, and they accept it, why can't we do that again? Why can't we produce an application and put it in and see if it works? Why do we have to have 4 separate bodies advising each other on this? That just seems crazy. Sorry. And I'll speak again at 17B, or 16B, sorry.
No, you won't.
So I have to keep going now.
Quickly.
I think
All right.
he's already pretty much said everything.
Well, I haven't, but okay.
Quickly, please.
I also thought my idea of an overall compromise for an idea would be tell it all, keep it out there, restore it 100% with the water. 2 plaques on either side. 1 plaque saying at one time, 1 race could drink from this, now all. On the other side, as you said and other people have said, this is for the troops. Put the names of the Confederate soldiers of Denton County on there, on another plaque. Plaques on either side. Restore the monument. On the inside, I know in 2018 you're breaking ground on a new $35 million commissioner's court on 288. So why don't we, as I've heard from some of you say that this place will mostly be vacated of bureaucracy, turn this into a museum overall and include many exhibits, just as the man said before, to Zach Rollins, to the other black African Americans who are both slaves and free in this county, who were taken from all their places. There are so many things we could add and do in this place to tell it all sides of history. Even some of the people who come to counter us agree. Tell it all. Bring everyone up to date. Tell all the history. We're going to have this whole place as a museum, it seems like I've heard. Why can't we use that? I think that's a perfect compromise. Why do you even need an advisory committee? Fix it. Make a museum. Thank you.
Okay.
Judge Horn, this is one of the problems we have. I've got this young man who yelled at me on the square. When I go up to my office, I ask him if he'd like to talk, and he basically turns tail and runs. On one hand, they want to be able to talk at you, but they don't truly want to have a discussion.
Quit. Okay, let's move through. We've got about 6 more here, and I want to move through them quickly. John Goodman. Following John will be Matt. I'm sorry, I can't read this last name. Grenada. Thank you. Morning, John.
Good morning, Commissioners.
You don't want to talk.
Please, let's go.
Oh, yes, ma'am. One moment. Thank you. Apologies.
John, if you've got something to say, please say it.
Yes, ma'am. Just preparing. I want to make sure that I speak with purpose and speak carefully. I am afraid that, given past discussion, that my words could easily be taken out of context. So I'm gonna take care to prevent that from happening. First, I wanted to start out by saying, by clarifying rather, given this is an agenda item, per the Open Meetings Act, there's no time limit for public comment, correct?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Given that this is an agenda item, there is no time limit for public comment, correct?
I can tell you this, and you might want to ask, we can get an opinion from the DA, but the agenda is controlled by the county judge, and she can limit those who speak and who can't.
Right, but this is an agenda item, which...
It is a posted agenda item, and I'm trying to move the things along, so please be respectful to the other people that want to speak, and we do have other things on the agenda today. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes, and if you can't wrap it up, what you've got to say in a couple minutes, too bad.
So I only have a couple minutes.
Yes, and
So
you've used a couple minutes just preparing to speak, so please get to the point.
So legally, I don't have unlimited time for this agenda
That's
item?
correct.
Okay. When this is going to be an advisory committee and its final decision is only a recommendation, why do we also narrow the decision-making ability to plaque wording when this is only going to be an advisory committee?
It may not be. We don't know that yet.
Okay.
Move on.
So you're open to... I'm not sure that's how the
There'll
dialogue
be an
should
open
go in this
My
process.
priority is the plaque. That doesn't mean it's the only thing that's going to be discussed. The plaque is my priority. I think I've been very clear about that from the beginning.
Okay, but you're open to a committee to also take further action.
I made the point of saying the headline of the paper indicated there was a dispute between us. There's no dispute. I can't talk to the other members without violating the open meetings law. So the place to have the discussion is in an open court, and that's what we're doing today.
All right,
so please move on.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Judge. Just to clarify, we were going to allow public comment, shut it off, have a discussion amongst ourselves whether or not to establish the committee.
Correct.
So that's what's going on. We're taking public comment, and then we'll vote to see whether or not we'll have a committee.
Okay. I thought...
Tried to establish that at the beginning for everyone.
Right. Last time there seemed to be no time limit for agenda items, and I thought this was the same type of...
You're using all your time right now.
For better or for worse, the county judge is the chair of the meeting. She can select whatever agenda items that she wants to take first, and she can limit the comment whether she likes on the comments that are given. Time and
Commissioners, if we would just let him speak.
I understand I'm waiting.
Yeah, I wish you would.
Okay, Commissioner... Commissioner Marchant, you mentioned that you've never been pushed away from the square because of the Confederate monument. I wanted to respond to that directly and say that when Confederate Vice President Alexander Stephens said, "Our new government's found up on exactly the opposite idea. Its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and normal condition." The white race that you and I share was not subjugated. So there isn't reason for us alone, not considering empathy, to be uncomfortable by that. We can see others who are people of color be uncomfortable from that and think that that's not fair to have that demonstration kind of uplifted on a pedestal that used to be a segregated water fountain. And we can make a judgment that that's not okay, and that is a judgment that I make. I also want to support the committee not the committee to change the wording of the plaque. I think the decision should rest in the hands of the citizens far more than that of the commissioners, and that the committee to decide what to do with the Confederate monument should be formed. That would be 16A. Is that correct? All right. As a constituent of Denton, I support 16A then.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jessica Luther. Oh, I'm sorry. I've got so many sheets up here. I'm trying to give everybody. We'll be followed by Jessica Luther. Go ahead.
Here's the great orator.
Okay. Real quick, I have a question. So we have 16A and 16B. Is this an either or would we have
both?
Both can move forward.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Before I start speaking, I would like to take a minute to thank Commissioner Eads for stepping in a little bit ago and reintroducing decorum into the session. Since the beginning of civilization, elected officials have had to answer to their constituency, and our greatest officials, our greatest representatives in this country have always reacted to that with respect and taking that with a thick skin. I know that right now at our highest office, there's a tendency right now to be thin-skinned and venal and like to bicker. So Commissioner Eads, I would like to thank you for that show of respect and basically kind of showing everybody how elected officials should interact and maintain decorum. I truly admire that and respect that. Thank you. I'm not necessarily a fan of 16B or 13D necessarily because those seem to kind of perpetuate what seems to be the problem right now and kind of hold the status quo. That was mainly going to be my short statement. But I would like to answer a couple of questions that Commissioner Marchant was asking. Recently, I had the opportunity to come up here and request a permit to hold a function here on the courthouse grounds. And actually, interestingly enough, the statue being in the background kind of is good for what I wanted to do. It's a nice thing. When I was talking to Cheryl and Teresa, they thanked me for coming up and doing things the right way, and I want to thank all you guys for approving that permit. They said thank you very specifically for doing things the right way and asking for a permit because they said they do have functions here at the courthouse from time to time. And they want to, basically those functions can be ruined by people coming up to protest. It didn't occur to me that not everybody got permits, so.
Somebody could be getting married.
Yeah, exactly, and I'm glad you mentioned that. I was talking to my wife about it, and I said, yeah, I said I would imagine it would be a pretty bad thing to, have the happiest day of your life go forward, and the highwaymen from Mississippi showed up with their guns outside of the statue, and my wife said, you know what, I would never want to get married at the courthouse. And I said, why, because of that? And she's like, well, even if it wasn't because of that, given everything that is happening right now and the social stigma involving Confederate statues, if I had my pictures taken there and I had my reception there, I wouldn't want to do that because it would tie the happiest date of my life, to that. So for Commissioner Marchant, I think that's something that we do have to consider. This is a courthouse where people do get married and everything, and considering the stigma that's being associated with Confederate statues, and considering that this statue doesn't actually have a historical tie to Denton in that there were no battles here, maybe that's something we want to consider, because going forward, while you and I come to the square, and I do have feelings about this, but my kids also love ice cream. I do have to consider that, and I have talked to my kids about what the statue means in the history of Jim Crow. So it hasn't necessarily scared me off from the loveliness of getting Beth Marie's. This is not a paid advertisement. I just love Beth Marie's.
We all do.
Courthouse pecan is my favorite flavor. So anyway, but I did want to mention that there is a thought out there, and there is a consideration right now that young brides would have, in that would prohibit them from using this rather beautiful building. It is a beautiful building, and you don't see a lot of architecture like this around going into new courthouses. New courthouses are concrete and they're square and they have hard angles and everything. And if we didn't have that out there in front of us, we would have wonderful pictures of a classic architecture that you don't see anymore. So that's that. Commissioner Coleman, you mentioned something a little bit a while ago about when we were talking about history.
I'm a big fan of irony, and
Yeah.
I read a lot, and I was surprised when somebody I thought had at one point, and correct me if I'm wrong, had talked about how the Commissioner's Court had not taken care of the statue.
Oh, I'll get to that in a second. I was about to talk about something else.
Somebody
And
showed me a video of you where you thought
Yeah.
it was really funny early in the morning to put birdseed in there for the sole purpose of having it defecated on.
yeah, and I'll get to that.
on
I'll
one
get to
hand,
that in a
publicly,
second.
he's
You're kind of
asking to
interrupting me,
criticize
if you
for
wouldn't
us not
mind.
to maintain it, but on the other hand, he's actively doing something to
Yeah.
cause damage.
I am a huge fan of irony, and I'll get to that in a second.
Okay,
What I was actually going to address a second ago was you mentioned history, right? And discussing basically the differences that people can have when addressing history. Now, hopefully, whatever comes out of this, if it winds up being a plaque and everything, we can agree that that statue was built during the Jim Crow era. And you are aware and you agree that the Jim Crow era did exist, and the Jim Crow era was basically meant to intimidate blacks, people, right?
The Jim Crow era was a bad time for the America.
Right.
But I'm going to let you also know something. There was a person that was a known duelist, supposedly had a bad temper, was the Secretary of the Treasury, and had a horrible reputation in American history.
Right.
But a guy made a Broadway play about him.
Right.
And now history has
By the way,
decided...
I saw that on Broadway. I saw that on Broadway, and it was great.
And then
Have you?
all of a sudden, because they did this Broadway play about it, the optics on what he did during the Revolutionary War has changed quite a bit.
Right.
But my point to you is, I don't believe in cultural book learning. I do not believe that Jim Crow was a good thing for our society, but I also don't think we should sanitize history.
No, and that was my point. My point
Because
was not
Hamilton is now
sanitizing history.
glorified, while at the time, they bragged
Yeah.
about how many bullets he carried in
Yeah.
his duel.
Anyway, my point was not about sanitizing history or moving anything. My point was that if we are going to address history, I would hope that everyone would agree that that is a part of the history that needs to be included in this monument.
Can you wrap up, please?
Yes, and really quickly, by the way, yes, I did used to seed around the statue because statues were made to be pooped on by birds, and I thought it was a nice little peaceful protest. But anyway, I'm glad you're a fan. Make sure you like me on YouTube.
Well, I just thought it was ironic that somebody who's criticized elected officials, or somebody who wants to be an elected official like Trump, for bad behavior, than to engage in that kind of stuff. But
I am a huge
I
fan
saw
of
the
irony. You and I can sit down and we can discuss all our ironic faves.
There you go.
Thank
Okay,
you.
but not now.
You have a great day.
Let's move
Exactly.
on.
Thank you for
Jessica
listening to me.
Luther, please come. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Uh,
I don't plan on reading all this today. Don't freak out.
Good. Thank you.
No, not at all. I'm submitting a second citizens report to you today for your reading later. Just a quick summary. Bottom line, I think, let me stop and start over. First of all, thank you for.
Is this going to be relevant to the formation of the committee?
My thank you or what I have to say today?
Just logical question, answer the question,
Yes,
please.
everything I have to say today will be relevant. As I said just now, I'm not planning on reading this to you. I have submitted it to you for your review on your own time.
Thank you.
I wanted to start out by saying thank you for allowing
Welcome.
us the opportunity to have this discussion today. The discussion, I agree, is just as important as anything that comes as a result of it. These discussions are part of the problem. The lack of these discussions are part of the problem. The lack of these kinds of discussions are why we have a courtroom full of citizens that are scared, that are angry, and that just want to see something happen. They know that what they have right now isn't right, and they need something to happen outside of a status quo. I think everyone's made it clear that a fourth plaque revision is not what they're looking for. And I think the main issue behind that is what you're going to see in the report that was provided to you today, which is basically an extensive chapter of history that just isn't told, that just hasn't been told. And your own, historians from the DCHC have come here today and discussed that as well. That's a big problem. And I think that, granted, while a lot of people still probably wouldn't agree with it, still probably wouldn't like it, I think that if we were able to wrap our minds around a concept of the Confederate monument out front with a commissioner's court in full agreement that that monument played a role in racism and segregation in Denton's history, with Quakertown museums that didn't have historical inaccuracies, saying things like there was no KKK in Denton, which is not true. There was a Denton KKK chapter, number 136. They met in Wow Hall. They posted their lodge meetings in the Denton Record Chronicle.
You're saying we asserted there was no KKK chapter?
No, I did not.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't say that at all. What I said is there's a Quakertown museum that says that. And that's just one example of the many inaccuracies that exist.
Right. Well, I've got kids who go to Calhoun Middle School, and they all read White Lilacs, which was a very good book. And they came home and spoke to me several times about Quakertown and the removal in TW. So I think our school system is actually doing a pretty good job about giving us a good history of our town.
That's wonderful. I hadn't approached the school system yet. I was talking about the historical artifacts and narratives that we tell as a city and a county, not in our school systems. But I am glad to hear that.
So I'm making a note here, Jessica, so we make sure we're accurate. That's in the Quakertown Museum? That's
yes,
what you
there
said?
are many
Okay,
historical inaccuracies there.
We'll get the staff to look at that.
Sure.
Thank you.
So again, I just want to say the reason you see so many people motivated is because people are scared. I think that's been made very clear. They're scared about what they can't control, which is what people will use things like the monument for. They're scared that if they don't speak up, if we don't make changes, if we don't do things differently, that we will continue to see an attack on fact. I find it really interesting that 100 years ago, a large movement, mainly by people who ran the state schools here in Denton, supported by women's heritage organizations, made a push to remove black citizens from Denton so that white girls would feel comfortable coming here to go to college.
I understand we've studied that, but what does that have to do with the
I'm trying to
Confederate
get
Memorial
there.
Thank you.
I'm trying
to figure it out.
I'm trying to get there. You just beat me by half a second. A little bit of patience. And now we're here, white girls, going to college, using the vast tools made available to us, and we're saying, wait a minute. What I'm seeing here, weighted in historical fact and documents, doesn't match the common narrative. And then we have commissioners that are attacking that educational process and literally mocking it. That's scary.
Who's that?
That would be you.
I would disagree with you. When you talk about common narrative, what does that mean? Is that history, or is that facts, or is that a collective decision on what history should be? So define common narrative for me.
Would you like examples?
Is it your common narrative? Is it Bobby Mitchell's common narrative?
I would say that a common narrative would be one that is
Popular at the time?
Whenever you're done, sir.
I'm done.
So I would say my example of a common narrative would be one that's published by the county on a county website, would be one that's published on a social media platform by a county commissioner, would be one that's expressed by a council person to a media representative. These are things that affect common narrative. Judge Mary Horn, I know that you and I disagree on some facts. When you say to the press that the monument's fountains never worked, that creates a historical narrative that does not match historical evidence and documentation. That's a problem. It's not a matter of opinion. It's fact. It's historical document. It's what any historian that you would meet in a professional capacity would use exactly to tell you what happened. They would use the tools that people had then to document history, and they had newspapers, and they had their internal organizational documents. That's why they kept minutes.
That is true.
These are the things
Sometimes newspapers get things wrong, and we've been researching that.
Right, and sometimes newspapers reiterate what we have in other city and county documents, like, for instance, the water fountains. They
We don't need
reiterate.
to dispute that.
We don't have to, and that
Point in
wasn't my
time.
intention, so let's not...
Please wrap up. We've got a few other
Let's not
people.
go down that
and we
road.
need-
That wasn't my intention. It just kind of went there based on a
Okay.
question. Sorry.
Okay.
So again, I think that these are the things that we want to talk about, these historical narratives. It's bigger than the monument. I want to see action taken on the monument. But more than wanting to see it ripped up and removed and just gone, or more than seeing it, go away and now we're trying to rewrite history. No, not at all. What I would love to see is a complete and full history of Denton. And I think that once we do that, we have to start asking questions about the appropriateness of some of the things that we put on public property, that we put at the foot of our court steps. That's the relevancy. Yes, sir, Mr. Marchant.
Go ahead,
And I'm glad
finish
to... No, that's a good place, and I'm glad to see you back today,
just,
by the way.
Out of everything that you said, I haven't heard, and if you said it, I apologize, I didn't hear it, is in a formation of a committee, do you support 13A or do you support 16? Am I saying it backwards?
I know. I'm just going to tell you what I support instead of giving you letters and numbers. Is that cool? I'll just tell you what I support instead of giving you letters and numbers, if that's okay. I'll just directly tell you which committee.
Direct it to the agenda
Yes.
item.
Yes,
okay?
absolutely. Of the only two options available,
Right.
I would say that I would support a committee that is open and broad spectrum to a solution, not focused on a plaque item.
That's a good place to wrap up right there. Let's move on.
I know that's what happens when you state a position on the committee. You get booted out.
We're not booting you out.
Not
We're taking
booting you
your
out, we're trying to move on,
I
give other
understand.
people an opportunity to speak, and I think we've been pretty generous with our time. So please have a seat, and we're going to call up Mallory Skinner.
I just had one last statement, if I could, please. I just had one last statement, if I could.
Quick, do it.
I know that there has been some irritation by this court by the amount of time that has been demanded of it. I understand that must be frustrating. However, citizens who work 9 to 5, as you do, not in a courthouse, also find it very frustrating that when they get the opportunity or take the time to come here and speak their voice, that they experience a court with commissioners who use obstructionist tactics to defeat the purpose of the court.
I'm not trying to defeat anybody. I'm trying to give people an opportunity.
I would
to
disagree
speak.
with that quote-unquote common narrative.
You have been given time. You said you had one more remark. You've
I was
made a
trying to
remark.
finish
Please
it.
have a seat. Mallory Skinner, you're up next.
So you're not going to allow me to finish my statement?
No,
I just want to
ma'am.
clarify
You had
that.
the opportunity and you lost it. Mallory Skinner, you're
Because
next.
you didn't like what I had to say?
No, that's not true.
No, it's you have a hard time getting to a point. Mallory Skinner, please come up.
ask you to do something relative.
Sure doesn't look
to
like
the
justice.
topic
Lily
at hand.
Hudspeth, you'll be
Or
following.
democracy.
You wish to speak again. Mallory,
That's not democracy.
please have a seat. Good morning. Please be silent or you will be escorted out. Good morning. Please speak right into the microphone so we can hear you. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm not here to argue with any of y'all. I just want to come speak about why I think forming a committee, such as stated in item 16A, is so important. Last Tuesday morning, as I was exiting, I saw the museum displayed children's artwork, and one of them had a bunch of stick figures, and on it they had written "Build a Better World." I can't help but wonder, how are things going to get better if we can't work together or have productive conversations? Just passing through like approval of a plaque without forming these committees, I do not think would be working together. Things aren't going to get better that way. So, I mean, that's basically it. Forming these committees are important for everyone's side. These committees are not in support of the statute or not in support. It's not saying remove them. For all we know, it could end up saying that they want to be repaired and keep them. So these committees are important. I also want to say this statue is a reminder of a painful past for people coming to the square. My great-great-grandfather owned slaves. When I come to the square and I see this statue, I am reminded of the pain that my ancestors inflicted onto people because of their race. I do not want to see that when I come to the square. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, see, that's how you get to the point. Willie Hudspeth, did you wish to speak again, sir? Good morning.
Start in with your bullying on me. So I'll just wait for your bullying
Mr.
on me.
Hudspeth, that's inappropriate. To accuse somebody of something before it's even started, I don't think is appropriate.
All right, now, let me go ahead and start, and then I'm going to come back to that.
Okay, so, but Willie, you know what the good thing is today? I actually get to respond to your accusations.
Say it again.
The good thing about today is I actually get to respond to your accusations.
Good.
Please proceed.
I have been down here talking to you since 1999. You had a quote a few minutes ago saying,
I think you've stated you've been here every Tuesday since 1999.
okay,
That was what...
this is to Judge Horn's point. When did I say that to you? Or when did I say it aloud here?
Put it in the paper.
I think you said it in the paper, but go ahead.
The paper, right?
Okay.
The paper. And the paper is always accurate, isn't it?
No.
Okay, well, proceed.
My point exactly.
All right, good.
Willie,
Thank
what do
you.
you have to
Hey,
talk? What do you
I
have
know,
to
but
say
I
about
didn't
the
say
committee,
that.
Willie?
I didn't
He's
say that.
never going to finish if you all keep discussing it. Go
I
ahead,
know.
Willie.
Well,
What do you have
that's
to
for
say
sure,
about
but I
What do you
guarantee
have
you-
to say about the committee?
I am so glad that I get to say something finally. And I've always told you this, that I want you to respond back to me. So I can know what you think. Just tell me.
Well,
That's
Bill-
all I want.
Billy, you've told me what I've thought for years without ever talking to me.
Right. Now I'm asking you right here now, and I want to hear it. Here's what I'm saying. Now I can say, you're not going to bully me. I've been through this all my life. Now the thing that I'm working on.
Do you think calling names is productive, Willie?
What?
Do you think calling somebody names is productive?
Do I think calling someone's name what?
Do you think saying calling somebody a bully is productive?
No.
Okay, thank you.
So then you need to ask me, then why are you doing it? Oh, you don't want to know that?
I'm just asking if you're trying to be productive, proceed.
Okay. All right. I'd much rather that the committee be one that discusses all of it. I don't see how you can put a plaque out there with all of the stuff we're hoping to fix, to move towards something. Let's just talk about it. And I don't really care. Well, I do care, but who makes the decision It's no big deal. You make it, you're elected officials. The voters will then decide if they agree with what you decided to do. I mean, that's just the way the system works. Let me tell you something that I had to go through when I went to Vietnam. Hated it. I was 20 years old. Just out of high school a couple of years, and I didn't want it. I was scared to go anywhere. I'd only never left the north side of Fort Worth. But I went, and I was after I left basic training, they had us to salute. And in my mind, I had to figure out, just like Kaepernick, or how you say his name. Am I going to take one knee, or I'm going to salute, or what? And I did it. So I get it. I finally get it. I don't agree with it. I know I'm in this country. I have to agree with how it runs. You all have to make the decision. That's how it's set up. Then we vote later on. So let me just say what I wanted to say to try to move you in the direction that I want you to go in. And that's okay if I do it respectfully, and I know that. So I'm going to try. We got to work on this love and coming together business. We got to come together. You know what God told me, Sister Mitchell? Get your act together. That's what he told me. Get that together. You take care of the prejudices you have, and I've got them. He said, and then sometimes I'll say, I don't have any, I'm great. Shoot, here, worship me. Try that. He says, well, I've got them. I say, I don't have them. He said, let me give you a list. And he started telling me, showing me who I am. So, hey, I realize that you have to make the decision. Make the decision. Now, here's the thing that where we're going to disagree. You asked me, why do you come to the square? One reason. Right now. Now that you mentioned it, I need to check myself.
I think I asked you why you come to the square, but go ahead.
To protest that monument. Because, see, when I see it differently than you do. I grew up 3 generations after slavery. My dad was 2 generations, and he treated me like I was a slave. He would go to jail for child abuse to how he raised us, but that's all he knew. And I just saw bad things, guys. I'm 72 years old. I've just seen bad things that happen. Now, when I'm looking at the bad things, I almost always say, yeah, but I'm not doing it. Hogwash. Yes, I do. I do the same thing. So I'm just saying there's 2 parts of this. What do you see? What do I see? Now, can we talk about it? How are we ever going to get moving from point A to point B if we don't talk about it? So you say, you know, slavery was bad, and here's why. You know what I say? I have a lady who cleans my house, and my mom used to clean houses. I hate that. And I don't like calling her a maid, but I need help. So she comes in to clean the house. You know what God told me? Give her some extra money for Thanksgiving. I said, heck no, I can pay her. I ain't giving her no extra money. Give her a present during Christmas. She's Hispanic. My wife told me, you give her some money. You need to do that. That's a prejudice I have. So I'm just telling you, we all have them. When you cut me off when I'm driving, I'm old, and my cars won't go fast. The cars don't go fast, and I don't go fast. So I need to not try to cut you off again, because we all have those problems. If we don't talk about them, I think that's bad. So I say, have the committee, let's talk about the areas, and I think we'll move forward. You make the decision. You're going to be voted on by your constituency. That's what you do.
We agree, Willie.
But, oh, good. But, so, that's my point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that is a good place to wrap this up. I've got a few more public comment forms, but I think Willie summed it up really well. So, members, pardon me? Okay, I've got 1, 2, 3.
Do you have anything to add that hasn't been said?
Okay. All right.
Okay. That hasn't been said previously? Okay.
Just
This is? Margaret, go ahead.
Yes. One thing I want to say is that I've been coming now for several times. I've spoken to you. You were absent, I believe, when I spoke last.
Thank you. I watched the video and read the comments.
That's awesome. I appreciate that, and that you paid attention to what was being said. But I want to say that right now, what I have witnessed this morning in court is very disconcerting. I have witnessed hostility, and not only from the people that are here, but from the people that are behind me as well. And I think we need to just kind of come back to what it is we're actually talking about. It seems like Commissioner Coleman, I believe it is, that you kind of had an agenda set for today.
Excuse me, ma'am.
And the term
This is not a place for personal attacks. If you want to talk to me later.
personal attacks is exactly, I'm sorry, but what I've witnessed here today.
Right.
But aside from that, I also wanted to address, do I ever avoid the square as a result of the statue being here? So I want to tell you what my experience has been, and this is honest and this is truthful. So my daughter participated in an exchange program where she went to Germany over the summer. All right. The family that she stayed with, and that was through the school district, the family that she stayed with happened to be coming back to the States, and they had a layover, so they asked if we wanted to get together. So we met this German family, brought them. Of course, first place that I would think of to bring a family would be here on the square, right? You're going to go up to LSA, you're going to see a beautiful view of the courthouse, you're also going to see a beautiful view of the statue. So actually it was morning, and we weren't able to go to LSA, so I took them to Cartwright's. That same day, that we had out-of-town visitors that were at the Confederate monument with their Confederate flags and etc. So it started a conversation. All right. So we're going to flash forward, right? Then I had a visitor come in from Fort Worth a couple of weekends. Again, we went to Cartwright's. And again, there were people out on the square with their Confederate flags protesting. And both sets of individuals commented on how shocked they were at what was happening. So, yes, I will avoid the square in the future. Most definitely if I'm bringing people in from out of town. But I really hope, and the other issue that I took today was when you you said that the intentions of the people that have been coming here to speak, Commissioner Coleman, is just to kind of sort of create
I'll tell you what I said. I said I think they're upset with President Trump. And I think they're upset, and they're trying to leverage that as a controversy. And when Commissioner Mershon asked if people came to the square for things other than to protest, I wanted to know if you came up to the square for other reasons, and if the statue would keep you from coming. And I appreciate your insight about this statue.
Yeah, well, but
my point
in
is
saying that, do you understand what you're discounting? I've sat here and I've listened to all these heartfelt testimonies. And to say that just completely takes that away, and it colors the entire situation.
I would disagree with you, and that's why we live in America and we have the ability to disagree. I don't particularly care for Willie's methods, but I would fight and represent him as an attorney for his ability to come up here and protest, because that's what we do in America. Even with people whose views I may or may not agree with, or people that I may have controversy with, I would still make sure that he has the ability to come up here and do that. In the same vein, I would say that the people who I don't particularly care for their values, who come up with Confederate battle flags and all that stuff, they also have that right. So I guess your point, if you're telling me that if you like it, it's okay to have them protesting on the square, but if you don't particularly like their points of view, we shouldn't allow them.
No, that wasn't what I was saying at all. I was addressing the issue of hey, do you come to the square or do you avoid the square? And that I'm going to,
And I thought
in the
that-
future, and then in addition, I will also say, yesterday, I guess it was, or was it yesterday? No, it was on Sunday. On Sunday, when I was at the square, and yes, I was protesting the monument, that it was the second or third time that we've been approached by someone that was drunk, basically. On Sunday, the guy was supporting his Second Amendment rights and had a gun on his hip. That Twilight tunes were going on. It draws people to it for many different reasons. And I just hope that you're able to, even though you may have a different view, that you at least hear the honesty and the heartfelt emotion of the people that are standing in front of you. I mean, and the hostility, that it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable.
Well, I beg to differ with your assessment. To me, I think there's a lot of people who want to come to the square to protest. They want to come to picnic. They want to come to Twilight tunes on the movies, and when there are people who come here to listen to gospel music on Saturday. It attracts people, okay? That's what the square does. Now, having sat here for a long time, I have received a tremendous amount of hostility. I've had a lot of people say things that they know what I think when they haven't even spoken to me. And to me, I will defend those people who have the right to speak here on the square, regardless of whether or not I agree with them. Now, I know there may or may not be people here who have views that don't agree with those people and want to silence them as well. But that's not how you be fair and equal. Now, you can impugn whatever feelings you want to me, but those are not true.
Well, at no point when I was standing up here was I saying that the people should not be allowed to voice their opinion regardless of what that is. However, I would think that the court would not resort to, an open hostility. And quite honestly, your disdain for Mr. Hudspeth it's flagrant.
Well,
and
I think
it's
that's a matter
not
of
only is
opinion.
it flagrant, but it's unnerving to witness. Right. And I'm telling you that for me, it was emotionally impactful to watch what has happened in here today.
I'm sorry you feel like that.
Well,
Okay,
I
I
let's
can't help
that.
the way you feel.
If you have a comment concerning the committee, please make it, otherwise we need to move on.
Okay, most definitely. My comment is please increase the scope of the committee and then make it as transparent as possible, like I said the other day. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Matt? Matt, Grenada?
Already spoken.
Oh, he already spoke. Okay, I'm sorry. Jennifer, you've already been up here. Do you have something else to add?
Of whether or not people feel comfortable coming to the monument. I'm glad I have this chance because, yes, indeed, I am going to the monument these days, going to the square these days in a state of fear, which I never had before, because of having done active peace work with people who are very screaming, carrying weapons. So I'm choosing to go into a dangerous situation that I know could really inflame and erupt. Also, I want to point out that the banner in front of this courthouse, which has a picture of the courthouse, scrupulously leaves out the monument when it's advertising the museum hours. The 1968 promotional film, which shows shots of the courthouse, leaves out the monument. This court and everyone that works for the county and the city know that that is an embarrassment and turns people off. You're not advertising that we have this monument. You know it's a problem. You know it's become dangerous. And I think that you should not be so hostile towards us, towards Willie, towards people who speak. You're paid $112,000 a year or more to be sitting in those seats. That is what you're being paid for, is to hear people in all life conditions, whether they are overjoyed with what you're doing, whether they're angry with what you're doing, whether they're tranquil with what you're doing, whether they're enlightened about what you're doing. It doesn't matter what we bring. You guys are elected to be able to take it and to be able to hear the best in it. Every single person who talks to you is speaking to you from the best they have at that moment. And you can You can, Hugh Coleman. You can, Ron Marchman. You can, Mary Horn. You can, Bobby Mitchell. And you, Andy Eads, can also hear that core of enlightened nature in every word we speak. That's what I have to say. I support an open committee that discusses, that's transparent, and that is aimed towards really dealing with this situation and not pandering a plaque. We've done that before. This is a dangerous time, and it will remain so. I beg you to really get that. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandy Swan. I have one more public comment form after that, and don't anybody go complete another one. We're done after one more after Sandy.
Sandy Swan, thank you for allowing me to speak. I wish to speak in support of 16A, the wider scope proposal. 13D can certainly be considered within the scope of 16A. To my opinion, there's no reason to have 13D as a separate vote. The question was asked about whether people ever came here or were dissuaded from coming here. I moved here 13 years ago when I brought my son around the courthouse square the first time we came here. His very question was, what in the world is that statue doing here? He was in high school at the time, and he was quite shocked. And I did have to explain to him that no, Texas really wasn't still part of the Confederacy. It didn't exist anymore. I was very saddened as a parent to have to explain that to my child. And that statue sitting there to people puts a message out. The last thing I do want to comment on is that I do feel that some of the commissioners have been, yes, mocking, openly laughing, interrupting the speakers. You ask that we get to the point. You ask that we are respectful. I ask the commissioners to do the same, to please stick to the points, and to please respect the public. Thank you.
Alfred Sanchez. Excuse me.
Alfred Sanchez. I live at 711 Jackson Street. This issue, you know, it seems has a long history, and it boggles my mind. Why are we still talking about it? It could have been solved years ago, you know, and now we're doing the same thing we could have done, what, back in 1999, 2005, or whatever. It's just, I mean, I'm a businessman, even though I may not look like the way I dress, but you know what? If I made decisions the way sometimes it looks like you guys are, I'd be broke. You make decisions quick, and you live with them. And so I ask you all to make a decision and quit throwing it on to somebody else. I read the paper this morning, and I looked at the different options. I agree with Commissioner Mitchell. You know, I think the idea of just a plaque is ludicrous. Okay? We can't allow this to keep dragging on. We're spending taxpayers' money. We're wasting your time, and you're wasting our time. Okay? Like I said, I've worked for the U.S. Forest Service for 30 years. I have my own business, and I've been in committees. And this is ridiculous. I think it's time you guys, like they said, the ladies pointed out yesterday, make a decision. That's what you're getting paid for. And quit making, a show out of this whole issue. I've remodeled homes in East Denton. And when I first started, I started seeing these houses that didn't have complete 2x4s and had nails all in them. And I wondered these people must have built their house out of another house that they tore down. I didn't understand Quakertown, the whole history behind Quakertown. And I've remodeled probably about 6 or 7 homes in Southeast Denton. I live there now too. And it boggled my mind why people were using used timber. And when I learned about it, my heart was just like, wow. Can you imagine? I've moved my house. I moved when we first got married 4 or 5 times when we were young with our kids. And you know, anybody, if you've moved, how hard it is? Can you imagine moving your home, having to take your house down because you have to move? I think we have to stop and think of what our society has done to the black community, especially here in Denton. I still remodel homes in Southeast Denton, and in fact, I'm remodeling one now. And you see that, and it hurt. I don't know about anybody else, but it saddens me that this is our history. And it even saddens me more is that we don't learn from it. We continue repeating it. It's an easy solution, and I think Commissioner Bobby Mitchell has come up with a decent suggestion. The other thing is that when I was reading that article, it kind of saddened me that 2 of the commissioners failed to respond to the newspaper. I know you have a different opinion about it.
I responded.
Okay, yeah, you responded, but you have a different opinion, and I agree with you. Hey, let us make the decision.
Hey,
At least that's what they
I
said.
like your idea about a quick decision. We made a decision back in the court at the time, back in 2002, made a decision, but the original black. 2010, they revised it. Now it's come back up again.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish they would have settled it back in 2002.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm just saying.
Have worried about it since that point.
My only point was, I appreciate that you responded. I appreciate the people that responded in the newspaper, and I think those that didn't respond to the newspaper have something to answer to.
And we've already talked this morning about the paper doesn't always get it right.
Okay.
And so
I
we
think
preserve.
the paper does the best job.
Okay, I'm just
If
saying.
we reserve our comments for a public setting such as this, as an official record, it's more accurate.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, anyway,
We're not going
I
to
think
litigate this in the
it's time to make a decision. Okay?
So, Mr. Sanchez, committee, no committee? That was the agenda. What do you think?
What's that?
Mitchell's committee was.
You want Mitchell's committee?
Yes, I'd like a commitment, but I agree with Commissioner Mitchell. We have to open it up and look for all solutions.
Okay. Thank you for the input.
Mr. Sanchez, also, I would just add that I think it's been important. This is the second time that I've posted this on the agenda, and we have a lot of heartfelt feelings on the subject, and I think it's important that citizens have an opportunity to express themselves, although sometimes they have a hard time getting to a point and drone on a little too long, longer than I would like, but I do nonetheless express people taking time to be here and expressing that opinion. So with that, let's move on.
I'd just like to want to say one thing. You know, when I was a city attorney for little towns and I ran public meetings on their behalf, and I've been over to the city of Denton, if you go to the city of Denton, they have specifically rules about no personal attacks. They also have specific rules about who can speak and what items you can speak on and when you sign up. In this commissioner's court, we've always been very lax about letting people come up. And I guess this will be all over their social media, but being an elected official gives you the responsibility to listen to people, but does not, unlike what Ms. Lane said, make you their punching bag.
Commissioner Coleman, as
and my point is that when they come in and they, berate you for things or impugn opinions to you when they've never even spoken to you, I personally find that offensive. If somebody says that you're something, I feel like one of y'all said silence is acquiescence. I feel like I have a duty to respond to those accusations. And I deeply resent that anybody would say the fact that you interact with somebody and disagree with them means that you are hateful, rude, or disrespectful. I think all people should be able to do that. And when you have people who respond in a like manner, I don't see how you can be offended.
Okay, he finished. Commissioner Coleman, I agree that people should speak respectful to each other. Not only should that dialogue go out to you all, but we should you all should also speak respectful. I do disagree that every time that there's an item on the agenda, a citizen has a right to speak on that agenda. As mayor of Louisville, I served on the Louisville City Council. When a citizen came to speak, if they were disrespectful, I did stop them, and I asked them to address those opinions to me, because I was the presider of the meeting. But I did give every citizen an opportunity to speak. I didn't always like what they said, but I accepted the fact that they had the right to say it.
Right.
And having been an elected official, sometimes we get things that we don't like. And it's
completely
my
understand.
job, as far as I'm concerned, to rise above all the sometimes disrespectful remarks, because I think if I rise above it, they will take a clue from me, and they'll decide that I'm not going to engage them in that. And so they'll have to back down some. So that's what we have to do. And I know it's hard sometimes because you have been attacked, and you were attacked personally, and I understand that.
Well,
and
I
it's
mean-
hard to not attack back when you attack personally, because sometimes I do it. You
I've
know.
had people who talked about me for almost 8 years without even reaching out to know
Right.
what I say or what I think.
Yeah.
Judge?
Yes,
may
go
I,
ahead.
change the direction just a little bit. Judge, may I ask that, only because I'm on the side of a more open and the 16A, did I get it right? 16A, I would ask that that you would consider withdrawing that agenda item rather than us voting on that agenda item.
You mean 13D?
Yes, ma'am. With that, with the note that the plaque is an integral part of what your concern is on this committee that we form, and rather than having two separate votes, I think if you so choose to do that, I'm not by any means demanding that, or that's just a suggestion on my part.
Well, yes, the short answer. We can take action on 16A and just not take action on 13D. That
So
is
if the-
fine with me. I
If it fails,
I
then we
would
can
like
move
to
on to the next one,
reiterate that
Like Commissioner Mitchell said.
a historically accurate context for a plaque is a priority of mine, and I would like to make it a priority of a committee.
As a discussion point, as a clear option. yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, so like I told the paper, and I've stated earlier today, I think the decision, we can't assign our authority to a committee. We can't do that. As evidenced by the meeting I missed and the meeting today, this is a very hot issue.
Sure.
There are people who are very upset about the national political level, people who are mad at Trump. If you're a Republican, they're not going to be happy with anything that you do. I think that any committee that we form, regardless of even, Ms. Spoon or whoever got to choose the members, they would still be unhappy with what the outcome was because they want to be unhappy. And they need something to be upset about, regardless whether it's the environment, whether it's...
Please be silent or leave. Be silent or leave.
My point is that I don't think a committee is necessary. I think what we should do is assign it to the Office of History and Culture. I think what we should do is then take their recommendation and implement it. And if we disagree with it, we vote on it. That's what I think we need to do. If we form a committee, that's like Mr. Sanchez said, it's going to just be extending the decision, and regardless of what actions we take, there's going to be people upset. I think we need to be thoughtful and deliberate, but I think our employees who work in the Office of History and Culture are the people who probably don't have any agenda one way or the other. They probably are more interested in knowing about history. So that's why I would say I don't think we need to form a committee. I would rather us defer it to them. Any members that are going to be appointed to the committee, people are going to question the political, wherewithal, why they were appointed, whether they were qualified. I just seen it being a boondoggle. So that's my
Commissioner
point.
Eads. Thank you. Commissioner Eads.
I want to thank the members of the public for being here today and in the past, and I want to thank the historic research that y'all provided us. We'll take this into consideration. I do think we need to have a committee. I think we do need to have citizen involvement. I think that, y'all have done a lot of research. I think it's important that we get research from a variety of individuals Mr. Taylor, who spoke earlier today. You know, he's a wonderful historian and local preservationist, and that we've dealt with him for many years. And so I think having an open process is very important, and I think that the court would share that common value amongst the members here. I believe that we can find common ground, and I've issued a statement a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if they ran with it at the paper, but said that I think Denton County can find the right balance of preserving our history and also putting context and telling a full story. I think we're up to that challenge. I have hope. I have confidence that we can do that. I think a committee that's well represented, and it's beyond just the city of Denton. Okay, we have a lot of local activists here, but we each represent a broad cross-section of the county, the whole county. And I represent 17 cities, and we all represent a variety of demographics here, urban and rural. And so I think that we can do this. I would ask that the hostility that we've seen in the past go away, and that we join, because a committee is only going to be as good as its members and the input that it receives. Garbage in, garbage out. Okay? And so I think it's important that people lay down arms and that we work together. And I know there's a lot of people they come into this conversation with a result that they have in mind. I think everyone who's going to be involved may come in with a result in mind, and I think that they need to set that aside and come in open-minded. Part of it is a research. I would ask that part of this be a research project. There's a lot of urban legends and myths about water fountains working or not working. I think we're at a prime time with the future sidewalk replacement that's going to be happening here in 2018. We can utilize that time, and the time is perfect for us to do an archaeological dig, see what pipes are there. It's not what's written in paper. I'd like to know what is actually in the dirt, okay? I mean, I think that would tell us a lot, would it not? And so I think the timing is right. I think that might help settle that ongoing dispute, okay? And so the timing is right for that. I think we can do it. I think the court is willing to take this step to work with the community, to work with our historical preservation community, to work with the activist group. I would ask that the activists and the people who want to be involved join hand in hand with us and not be adversarial. Can we do that? And I think that's important. So a broader scope is what I believe is called for. I think the court would agree with that. Where we end up, I don't know. I would think we need to come back with cost estimates of repairing the fountains or not repairing the fountains, looking at the technical viability of that, look at all the options, come back with some recommendations. I don't want to be litigating this for 10 years. I don't think that's good for the public for us to be litigating this. I would like for us to be able to have a very thoughtful, detailed research project that comes in once and for all, the background of the memorial, and then we figure out next steps. Okay? And so I think that's, and preserving our rich history that we have here in Denton County and putting things in the right context. I think we can do it, and I'd ask for y'all's partnership and that not be an adversarial process.
And I would like to also say that we will be discussing the membership of that committee, and we have already received some applications. Our applications are some suggestions of people who are interested in serving on that committee, but we also need more so that we can make sure that we have a diverse amount of people throughout the county, not throughout the county as much as those that are interested in it from an activist standpoint as well as from a historical standpoint, and those historians that are interested in it because and then I think that it would be very, very important for us and I again support 16A. I think the next step is for us to determine what the committee guidelines are going to be, also the scope of the work that the committee is, and before we go appointing a bunch of people to the committee, I think that they need to know what that scope is.
Exactly.
I think they need to know what those guidelines are and before they sign on totally to this whole process. Because if you don't agree with the guidelines and the processes that we put in as a commissioner's court, then you're going to be nothing but a thorn in the flesh of the other members of that committee as we go forward.
So do y'all want to vote on the committee and then you can start working on the guidelines?
Yes.
Yep.
I move we form the committee as outlined
In 16A.
in A.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Eads, seconded by Commissioner Mitchell. I'd like to add in there that priority be the plaque. One of the priorities? Okay, well, how about priority?
What are other priorities?
Yeah, there'll be other items on their agenda, certainly, but
What
I would
other,
like to make
do you know, can you tell us what
historically
those are going to
accurate
be?
context for a proposed new plaque.
Okay, so I was wondering, so you're saying it's the committee is to look at the plaque and other items, not yet determined?
Further discussion, questions? All right, there's a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion carries 4 in favor, 1 opposed. All right, moving right along.
Let's take a break, Mary.
You need a break? All right, we're going to take a couple-minute break.